So soft skills aside, I think from a technical point of view, I think just being an out-of-the-box thinker. I think being someone who's analytically minded, who has a logical thought process, and just thinks outside of the box. I think that is the most important sort of from the technical skills that you could actually have.
Okay, welcome to it, and this is it. This is the student plug and the career drip, where we actually talk about anything that is to do with student development and also career development. And today I have Kim Lucas. I was attending that session that was organized by Nedbank, and a lot of students were saying that actually you have tweeted them. And in my mind, I was like, this man was my neighbor at RES. I wanted to brag as well.
Yeah, I'm actually still surprised because I felt like that was such a long time ago. I'm surprised people actually even still remember me.
It's crazy how time flies, right?
I know.
And
I think a lot of them I think they must have been in first year or second year at that time.
Probably.
And now to see them sort of third year honors, etc., I'm just like, geez, okay.
Yeah. No, they will be working with you soon.
Hopefully soon, yes.
Okay. So Kim Lucas is a Senior Quantitative Analyst at Nedbank, which is one of the top 5 banks? Do we have the thing of top 5 in SA as well? Because
yes.
I know in accounting there is a whole top 5 firms, and do we have the same thing in banks?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. So, when I was doing, even now, when I tell people that I actually study mathematics, a lot of people be like, they assume that I'm going to be a teacher automatically. It's so weird.
I get the same thing.
It's so weird. Even with students, like there would be students who would ask me like, hey, I'm doing this. What is maths going to do in the industry? What will I end up being in the industry? And I'm like, well, you can end up being a quant. And they're like, what is a quant? I'm like, a quant is a quantitative analyst. They're like, oh, didn't know about that. So you're a senior quantitative analyst at Nedbank. So what do you do?
So I think, you get a few different types of quants. Not all of them necessarily have the exact same type of work that we do, but I mean, in general, it's mostly around credit risk management. Some quants work in market risk, but I think generally speaking in South African context, most of us work in credit risk. So personally for myself, I work a lot with, you're going to hear these terms a lot, Basel and IFRS. And I basically build mathematical models based off of these regulations for the bank. So the general idea is, the concept where you put your money in a bank.
Sure.
Banks then lend out this money to other people for their homes, for their cars, or to build shopping centers or hospitals or bridges or whatever the case might be. And we need to make sure that when you as the client need your money, that it's still there, that it's not busy sitting with someone else, and that you actually have access to your funds. So to do that, we work out 3 main models, right? We have a probability of default, a loss given default, and an exposure at default. And the idea behind it is that we're trying to estimate how much we think the business is going to lose, say, for example, in a particular month. And then we hold that in cash so that if you as the client want to come to the bank and collect your money and someone hasn't paid us back, we have reserves available to service your needs. So, I think the whole idea really is just to make sure that we don't have another 2008 financial crisis. So I think that's everything in a nutshell. Specifically, I work on these models specifically for Nedbank Private Wealth. So that involves some of our home loans, overdrafts, and our international and institutional clients.
Wow. So the models that you're talking about, and for me, even to this day, the banking sector or just banking in general is still a concept that is very interesting to me. I don't know if you're aware of stock files. There are these things called stock files, and which is also a very big market. I remember reading some article. I'm not sure from which bank it came from. I think FNB, and there was claiming that the stock file market, which is predominantly in Black communities, is worth something like some billions or something like that. So what these stock files do, they contribute money, and after that, and they borrow the money amongst themselves. So it's like, circulation of money. Similarly to the way the banks work, just like you said, that you put in money there, but it doesn't actually stay there. Because I used to think that if I deposit my money in the bank, it's just there and it's waiting for me. I used to think that there's a very big vault where there is the money and there is my name on the vault. And stuff like that. But I later learned that no, actually the money is circulated, and there are people who actually make sure that the system is sustainable. In other words, like you said, that you don't go to the bank and they're like, hey, there is no money and stuff like that. So what's the difference?
That doesn't happen.
Can it ever happen though?
I mean, it has happened in the past.
Really?
We would hope it never happens, but it has. I mean, that's happened in Greece. It's happened in a few places around the world.
So what is the difference between what you guys do and what actuarial scientists do?
Look, I'm not an actuary, so I can't speak 100% for them. So I can only speak from my perspective of what I know of them.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I feel like we very often do very similar work. We just don't work in insurance.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of the skills are very transferable. Look, as a quant, you haven't written your board exams. So you're not going to just walk into an actuarial firm. And I have seen it. But I think it's not the most common thing in the world. Really similar, or at least in terms of the skills that you need and just how you go about doing your work. Because at the end of the day, the actuaries are doing basically almost the same thing for an insurance company.
True. No, that's true, because I was speaking to some guy who's an actuarial analyst, and actually he was telling me about that as well, that they make sure that the claims, so if somebody claims, they still have money, they still have some reserves. So it's also almost all similar to the circulation of money, but I think
it's similar, but it's not the same. But it's similar. But I mean, just in general, insurance companies and banks don't operate the same. I think banks, is probably one of the most unique operating models in the world. I don't think you ever find another business that works exactly how a bank does. They're just so complicated and intricate. But I mean, it's fascinating. That's fascinating. I don't think any one person can actually know every single little thing about banking. I think it's impossible. That's why we have, huge teams of experts to manage everything.
Yeah. So you spoke about models when you were explaining your role as a quantitative analyst. What kind of models are these? Are these mathematical models, as in like those that we have been doing here, like in mathematical modeling, or there's other modeling that happens in the banking sector?
Again, it depends. I think it's not as straightforward as what we've seen at school.
Yeah.
But in some regards, also not as complicated. So I think it's a hybrid of sort of what we've learned at school, plus a lot of business knowledge, a lot of business information, because we can't just build models that are purely mathematical or statistical. We can't, because those don't necessarily always work in the real world. At the end of the day, we need to take into account sort of how does the business operate? What do our markets look like in South Africa? What do the economic forecasts look like? And those are things that also sometimes are very difficult to quantify. So you get parts of the model that are, yes, it's very mathematical, very statistical. Some of them are as simple as a linear regression. Some go more complicated, like using Monte Carlo simulation. It just depends what are your needs and what are you trying to actually achieve, right? To use the right tool for the right job. But with that said, there's generally very often, and I think especially in the space of private wealth, there's a lot of things that you can't quantify. And we kind of have to rely on expert judgment and just previous experience within the market to make sure that, what the model says actually makes sense for the real world as well.
Yeah, I see.
So it's a nice combination of the two, I think. And I think, one of the other big differences is we're not doing things by hand. So it's not like, back in the day where you get your pen and paper and you work everything out. You're like, cool, great. Everything is programmed. The amount of data that we work with is massive. I'm not even joking when I say, I've worked with tables with billions and billions of records. And you can't, put that in Excel and make a pivot table or something like that. Okay. You really need to know your stats. You need to know some form of programming language, whether it's SQL or Python or SAS or R or whatever the case might be, to actually be able to manipulate the data to get it to a form where we can then apply sort of the maths and stats models that we learned at school.
So which coding language should one know on the go getting into being a quant?
I think if you're specifically going down the quant route, SQL and SAS are your two main focuses, but it's also not uncommon to need Python as well. Not as much as sort of like a data scientist or something like that, but it is becoming more and more common. But I think SQL and SAS are definitely a starting point. I've never worked at every single bank, so I don't know, but most of the quants that I know working within the risk space mostly use SAS and SQL.
Yeah. And the skill set that is required for someone to be a quant, obviously coding, as you've just alluded right now, but what are some of the skill set perhaps, maybe especially on the mathematical science of things or on the analytical science of things, what would you say that somebody should sort of have in the skill set base?
I think one of the most important things, and I'm specifically talking about technical skills, not the soft skills. Those are important. Very often, I think your soft skills are more important than your technical, because at the end of the day, it's still a corporate environment. You can be the smartest person in the world, but if you can't explain something to someone, then there's no point in actually being there, if that makes sense. So soft skills aside, I think from a technical point of view, I think just being an out-of-the-box thinker. I think being someone who's analytically minded, who has a logical thought process, and just thinks outside of the box. I think that is the most important sort of from the technical skills that you could actually have. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the time, we get work that we might not necessarily know how to do, if I must be honest. And you have to figure it out. So, and there's always different challenges that come up. There's always something weird that comes up. And then you're like, okay, well, how do we do this? You have to go back to basics. So I think if you're someone who very comfortably can work things out from first principles, to say, all right, this is where we start. This is how we go from step 1 to step 2. And along each step of the way, make sure that you're accurate, you're correct. I think that is important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't be like a robot. You need some sort of creativity, because solutions don't just come out of logical thought process. It's important to make sure that your solution's correct, but you also need to be able to think outside of the box. And I think that's what, mathematics teaches you. I think a lot of people, think mathematics is, how can I say, like very strict and structured and disciplined type of study, but it's actually very creative. I think you would know a lot of the proofs that we go through, especially I think when you get to a postgraduate stage and start, making your own proofs, you realize you've got to really think sometimes to come up with a solution. And that's why, whether it's you studying math or stats or actuarial science or engineering, it doesn't really matter. As long as you've got that thought process, to think logically and analytically and think outside the box, that is what we need.
So most of the time, who are the people that you actually take? Obviously people who come from those backgrounds that have analytical thought process and stuff like that, because I know somebody who has done physics and they're also working as a quant, also I've also met some people with some engineering background who are in the banks, and it's fascinating. It's always fascinating for me. I'm like, so you did chemical engineering and you're in a bank, how interesting is that?
Because again, it comes down to being able to think logically. So most of the time, it's not set in stone. Most of the time you are looking at people from some sort of quantitative discipline.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't matter if it's physics. You do so much math in physics. So whether it's physics or engineering or stats, actuarial science or maths or applied maths or whatever the case might be, it's all sort of numerical, analytical fields of study. Look, every now and then you get quants from sort of maybe finance or economics and things like that. So I don't think there's a set rule that's in stone that says no, you have to have this. Again, like I said, it's more, can you think in the right mindset? But I think for the most part, I think companies prefer to tend people from more rigorous math disciplines. And I say that just because I think it's very often a lot easier to teach business, the business side of things, than it is to teach the math side of things. Just because I think a lot of, sort of the business acumen that you need within a bank, it's very specific to a bank. And look, I did some economics. My other degrees in corporate finance and investments, and those gave me great skills to understand what's going on, sort of within the financial sector. But none of them were specific to banking, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I think banks being so unique, no matter what discipline you come from, you're going to end up having to learn on the job, sort of, the business and finance side of things anyway. So I think it's a lot easier, to take someone from a math science background and, bring them up to speed. And I think that's just what the market seems to prefer at the moment. But like I said, I don't think anything is necessarily set in stone. You definitely do need a degree, though. I will say that. Preferably in honors. Again, it's not set in stone, but just looking at what the market sort of is looking for is really at least an honors degree.
It's quite interesting. I don't know if you know, there is a guy called Jim Simmons, and there's a guy, I think, called David Shaw. These guys are mathematicians. They each have a PhD in mathematics, and they manage one of the top hedge funds. And what this guy did, Jim, is that actually he employed, he took only PhD students from whatever, like especially from quantitative sciences like physics and stuff, people who didn't know anything about finance, anything about the stock exchange, and they just taught these people. But because these people have this quantitative analytical background, man, those guys milked the stock exchange. Like their hedge funds are performing very well and stuff like that. So it's very interesting of how you have this thing going on now whereby it's no longer necessarily about the know-how of the finance markets or of finance, but it's about the innovative, creative, analytical skills that one brings into it.
No, look, I think you do need to know the finance.
Sure.
You definitely need it. You wouldn't be able to work in the business without it. But I think it's from the view of what I've experienced as a quant, those are things that you could learn along the way.
Sure. True.
That's basically what I'm trying to say. Just because, banking is so niche, it's very difficult to find specific information that you're looking for. So I think it's very difficult to teach a course on that, especially because a lot of the banks have their own, sort of proprietary models and things like that, especially when you're dealing with market risk. So those are not things that you're going to find in textbooks.
Yeah. Wow. So let's go back to the soft skills. You spoke about soft skills briefly, and it is one subject that, even at university, we don't actually dwell much on. We just want students to pass and everything. And you start to see it when you start applying for jobs, that actually now these people, yes, I have the qualifications and they are good, but now they are not interested in this anymore. Well, they are interested in it because that's what brought me here. But now they start to actually get a deep dive into your character, the soft skills that you have and stuff like that. What would you say would be some of the, the soft skills that are definitely required, in the quant space, especially in a bank?
So I think, just broadly speaking, I think, being able to hold a conversation with someone, and not be awkward, being able to, stand on stage and actually speak. You need to be able to present. There's a lot of presentations that you're going to be doing. You need to be able to, I think, manage people. In a corporate world, you're dealing with people from all different walks of life, and people are different, and not everyone thinks or reacts the same. So you need to have the ability to see, like, okay, this person thinks type of things like this, so I'm going to explain it this way. Or this person prefers if I explain things this way. Because, I think one of the big parts of our job is also explaining very complicated things in a very simple manner. Because at the end of the day, not everyone understands the complexity of the work that we're doing, right? Everyone is a specialist in their own area, and there's so many things that the accountants and whoever else are doing. I'm like, it goes right over my head. Okay, like, to me, accounting was one of those difficult subjects at school. So you need to be able to explain very complicated things. And because at the end of the day, if you're working on a project and you're saying, look, I've got a great way of bringing in more revenue or cost saving, whatever the case is, and you can't explain it, no one's going to buy into it. So you need to have those presentation skills and the ability to relay information and take your maths and stats work and turn it into a story. You really need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Right. So you almost need to be a little bit of a salesman as well, just for maths and stats, really. I think that is really, really important. Honestly, in terms of soft skills, there's hundreds and hundreds of things that you can really learn. I think, sort of conflict management is also very important. Just being able to sit and, analyze a room and see how people are, try and say, okay, look, this person's a little bit aggressive, let me not fight back. Or just learning how to deal with different types of people.
Yeah.
And again, it's not to say that, you need to deal with difficult or bad people. That's not the case. I mean, my experience is I've worked with some very pleasant people. But you need to be able to speak to people with different thought processes. You need to be able to just, manage the room and, calm it down if it needs to calm down. If it's not being productive, just being able to, sort of step up and take charge and, make the conversation a bit more focused or whatever the case might be. Now, those skills are really important. I'm honestly just mentioning a few, but there's a lot of soft skills that I think that you actually need to be successful, not just as a quant, but I think in a corporate career in general.
Yeah, and I like that. What I've seen in some of the videos, especially those of Nedbank, that I think there is what do they call that? Is it an orientation or some induction before you guys get into the thing? Mm-hmm. And I think they also cover much on those kind of things.
No, it is. I think that, that's one of the things that I'm also very thankful for. Before we, in the Nedbank grad program, before you actually embark on your first sort of projects or whatever the case might be, there is a lot of learning that needs to be done, and whether that's just bringing you up to speed about what's going on in the bank or, we had courses on business writing, and there's opportunities for to practice your public speaking and things like that, and it's a lot of fun, because I think those are things from university side you never think of, you never touch on. You don't even know that it's important until you actually start looking for a job and you realize, geez, what, actually these are important skills to have. So I'm very thankful for that, because we got to do a lot of training before we actually stepped into whatever role that you're going to walk into. So at least you don't walk into it completely blindsided. And look, I think the system works very well, and it's very helpful. It really is. And I think anyone who has sort of been on the Nedbank grant program will tell you, just and not just that introduction period, but the program as a whole, just how much you actually get to learn and explore. And very often I feel like we end up learning more than someone that actually just walks into a normal quant role off the get-go. You're just exposed to so many different people. And I think anyone in a corporate career realized, how important networking is. So you just get exposed to so many different people from different departments working on different ideas and different projects, and you really get a global overview of actually what's sort of in the space.
Very interesting. We're going to talk about the grad program just now, but your qualifications, you have a Master of Science in Mathematics.
Almost.
Oh, almost.
Almost.
Oh, is that something that you're still busy with?
Yes, I'm on the verge of just finishing up sort of my final draft now, and so hopefully that's gonna go well.
Oh, hopefully, yeah. No, it definitely will. But you have a BSc honors in mathematics, and you have a bachelor's degree in which was a triple major in mathematics, corporate finance, and investments and marketing. Just your journey. From what you have studied, your journey into getting into being a quant. How did you get there in the first place?
If I must be honest, it's something I never knew about until it was time to look for a job, if I must be honest. So I started my journey off in engineering. I really did not enjoy it. So then I was like, what, the math is fun. Let me just go and study math. That's what I enjoy. That's what I'm very comfortable. That's what I'm happy with. And so I picked up, marketing and corporate finance along the way, because I need points. And actually, ended up really enjoying those subjects as well. But my passion's always been with mathematics. So after that, I headed on and did my honors, and sort of halfway through honors, I'm like, look, I need to find a job for next year. So I just started researching careers. I started having a look at, what I can actually do in the market. At the time, I think I was really expecting to find something, in finance/marketing more than anything else. Because again, I didn't know that these careers for mathematicians ever existed. And I think Nedbank dropped off a flyer in the study room one day, and I had a look at it, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then I think a day or two later, someone came and had a talk with the class, and I was like, oh, this sounds a lot more interesting than everything I've been looking at. And that's when I started my research, into the field of a quant, and realizing, there's data scientists and actuaries and all these other things. I'm like, no, this is interesting to me. I'll give it a shot. And I started applying. And that's when I realized, it's not just Nedbank, but it's Standard Bank, Capitec, Absa, it's everywhere that actually needs quants. Mostly within the bank, within the banking sector. You do every now and then find roles, within other financial institutions. But so I started applying. I think I applied for every single entry-level quant role that I could think of. And I think I'm very lucky and very happy that at the end of it I managed to end up in Nedbank. And I think that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And
so let's talk about the graduate program. And I know with graduate programs, in most cases, there is this rotations, right? But let's talk specifically about the graduate program being a quant, like the quant graduate program. I know people rotate through, there is business banking, there is credit risk, like you said, there is personal loans and unsecured lending and stuff like that. Just, briefly, elaborate on the graduate program.
Sure. So I think, look, I might be wrong because it's been a long time since I've looked into graduate programs. But at the time that I applied, Nedbank was the only rotational based program. A lot of the others sort of put you within a specific team, and that's where you work. Whereas here with Nedbank, I really like the fact that you could sort of choose different business areas. No one was saying, hey, go work there. I had an ability to say, look, here's my interest. This is the career path I'm looking for. Let me try go down this stream. Oh, I don't like this. Let me try something else. And I think the idea behind it is that you don't know what you don't know. It's the same like when we came from high school. We went to university, we said, yes, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer. You come to first year and you realize it's terrible and you hate it and you want to do something else with your life. It's the same thing happens when you get to work. You have an idea of, oh, this is the job for me, but you don't really know what it is or what it entails or how you actually do it. And you don't really know that until you actually start doing it. So I think that's, the whole idea behind it is that you have this opportunity to make mistakes. Because if you pick something and you really don't like it, you have sort of 2 years to sort of try and find, sort of something else where your passion actually lies. And, the different roles are very different. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of, in terms of soft and technical skills, there's a lot of overlap. But the work is actually quite different. And I think a lot of the time it's also finding the right team that you want to work with, because you can have the best job in the world, but if you hate the people that you're working with, you're not going to have a good time. So it's really a great opportunity to learn and explore within a safe environment. And I think at the same time, you're also not doing baby work. The work is very much real. You definitely feel like you're a part of the team and you're actually making contributions, to the banking and financial sectors. A lot of the projects that you work on are real projects. They're not sort of just dumbed down versions of things to keep you busy while you figure out what's really going on. It's real projects that have real impacts on business. And that's something I really appreciate, because the skills that you learn within there, I think you're not going to get anywhere else. And in addition to that, there's a lot of, training in terms of soft skills. There's training in terms of technical skills, just making sure that your programming, your business knowledge, and any other technical skills that might be lacking you so are up to scratch. And it's a great networking opportunity, because you get to work with, not just quants, but senior managers and executives from all different clusters within the bank. So, you walk out of that grad program knowing a lot of people and building a lot of connections along the way. Honestly, it is probably, it is the thing that really jump-started my career. You walk out of that Nedbank grad program and honestly, you can do whatever you want. You can go anywhere, you can work anywhere, not just locally, internationally. International banks are, stepping in, unfortunately, and scooping up our people like nothing. It's really a good experience. It really is.
Yeah. Look, I want us to talk about the transitioning from varsity to the corporate world. And I want also you to touch on the advices that you can actually give somebody who's going to be starting out as a quant, or either in the grad program or someone in a quant,